Well, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has announced a new form of military-industrial cooperation with Ukraine. He says Berlin will help Kyiv develop its own long-range missile systems, free of any Western restrictions. Merz made the statement during a visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
A bumpy start to the Ukrainian president's visit to Germany.
Could you just give us a second? I think translation is not working.
You didn't have translation? And still? Now you have?
No, we don't have it either. Shall we check that? Give us a second.
Okay.
German technology.
It's okay. It's okay.
But behind closed doors, they dealt with serious issues. The key question: how can Germany boost Ukraine's ability to defend itself against Russian aggression? One answer: financial backing to help Ukraine produce long-range weapons that could be used against military targets on Russian territory within weeks. Today, our defense ministers will sign a declaration of intent on the procurement of long-range weapons systems from Ukrainian production, so-called long-range fires. There will be no range limitation. This will enable Ukraine to defend itself fully, including against military targets outside its own territory. Russia condemned the move as irresponsible. Whether Ukraine will get hold of Germany's most advanced long-range cruise missile Taurus remains unclear. Back when he was opposition leader, Merz strongly backed sending it. Now, as Chancellor, he refuses to debate details of weapons deliveries publicly. But the system is still on Zelenskyy's wish list. Long-range weapons produced in Germany and in other countries. Of course we need them. And we are discussing these issues. Another request from the Ukrainian president: an invitation to the upcoming NATO summit in June, where issues central to Ukraine's future will be on the table. To be honest, if Ukraine doesn't take part in the NATO summit, it will be a victory for Putin, not against Ukraine, a victory against NATO. But, of course, the decision lies with our partners. Merz has made Germany's stance clear, slamming Moscow for continued bombing of Kyiv and slow-stepping peace negotiations. But Zelenskyy is still waiting to see if NATO will draw Ukraine closer into the fold.
Right, for more analysis, let's speak to our Riga bureau chief, Juri Rescheto, and our political correspondent, Bernd Riegert, here in Berlin. Gentlemen, welcome. First to you, Bernd. Germany wants to help Kyiv develop its own Ukrainian-made long-range weapons. Is this a significant shift in Germany's stance towards Ukraine and its defence of the Russian invasion?
Well, I would say it's not a shift. It's making good on a promise to help Ukraine more with supplies and armament to defend itself against the Russian attack. The enhancement of the weapon cooperation and the production, the common production of weapons is already there and will be now enlarged to also weapons with longer range. That means that, for example, the production of the Ukraine-made Neptune missile might be supported now. And of course, if Ukraine makes this weapon, there's no restriction on its use, no limit also to use it in for targets in Russia. And this might be an elegant way out, if you will, for Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor, out of this internal German debate about the Taurus weapon, a missile made in Germany. And so far the Social Democrats, coalition partner here in Berlin, were reluctant to deliver that because they say the Taurus delivery could draw Germany more into the war between Russia and Ukraine. But the delivery of this Taurus weapon, which is already there and has not to be developed, is not off the table. This is what Friedrich Merz reiterated in an interview after his meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So the discussion is postponed, but not off the table.
Juri, to you in Riga, how is Moscow reacting to this joint weapons development plan between Germany and Ukraine?
Well, Anthony, we've heard it in the report. Moscow condemns as expected. Moscow warns Berlin. Moscow threatens Berlin. Moscow accuses Germany of becoming a direct participant in the war. But that is the one side of the coin, so to say. On the other hand, Russia feels pressure, I think, from the West and, of course, consequences of this war in its own country. Although the Russians are making progress, seemingly, on the front lines, their territorial gains are said to be minimal and their losses considerable. At the same time, the Russians are very interested in improving relations with America, and especially with Donald Trump, who in turn has stepped up his rhetoric towards the Kremlin in recent days. And yes, Chancellor Merz is now offering Ukraine extensive military cooperation. This is about long-term contracts and consequently also the long-term strengthening of the Ukrainian army. I think both are having an effect and are at least making the Kremlin move towards Ukraine diplomatically. And see here, proposing a new round of peace negotiations, for example. Foreign Minister Lavrov has proposed next Monday, June 2nd, as the date and Istanbul, Turkey, as the location for the next round of Russian-Ukrainian negotiations.
Yeah, Bernd, with June in mind then, how does Berlin view this new Russian peace talk proposal? Do you think Chancellor Merz would agree to Ukraine, to peace in Ukraine on any of Russia's terms?
No, he would not agree to this approach. What Germany says is always it's up to Ukraine to decide when and how it wants to make a ceasefire deal or even start peace talks. So Friedrich Merz is, as the former government, trying to support the Ukrainian stance and is also desperately trying, you have to say, to keep the Americans on board, to keep the Trump administration on the side of Ukraine. And it seems that there is some movement now on this diplomatic front. But for Germany and for the Chancellor, it's very clear decisions are not made in Berlin, but they are made in Moscow, Washington and in Kyiv.
Juri, you've been covering Russia for a decade or more now and from inside of Moscow before being in Riga now. What chances do you give these new peace talks proposed by Russia?
Well, look, we have to realize, first of all, that Russia has been backing up its diplomatic steps, such as this proposal for a new round of negotiations, with military steps. According to media reports, Putin's representative Medinsky, who led the Russian delegation in Istanbul during the first round of negotiations, he said, "We don't want war, but we are prepared for fight for 1 year, 2, 3, or as long as it takes." So I think the Russians will continue to create facts, so to say, on the front, that is, gain more land and in order to have a better negotiation position. At the proposed talks in Istanbul, they themselves say that the focus should be on the technical details. What could that be, Anthony? A new prisoner exchange? Yes. Preparations for a summit between Putin, Zelenskyy and Trump? Unlikely, but why not? But I don't expect a breakthrough or even peace next Monday in Istanbul.
Riegert Bureau Chief Juri Rescheto and our political correspondent Bernd Riegert in Berlin. Big thanks to you both.